Alright everyone, welcome to my first foray into fanfiction, on YouTube at least. The inspiration for this project was very simple. Sonic and Blaze are considered counterparts in the Chaos and Soul dimensions. The Chaos dimension is my preferred name for Sonic's dimension based on the Chaos Emeralds, as we call Blaze's dimension the Soul dimension thanks to the Soul Emeralds. Anyway, Blaze is also my favorite Sonic character, and she has a very different personality and overall vibe to Sonic, so I thought it'd be fun to imagine how the story would go with her as the main protagonist as opposed to him. The premise of this video is very simple. On the day that Sonic and Blaze are born, they are engulfed in a mysterious light. In an instant, they're transported across dimensions, each taking the other's place in their respective worlds. From there, they integrated themselves into their surroundings without even knowing that anything was wrong. For whatever reason, no one around them ever felt it necessary to tell them about the strange circumstances surrounding their birth. In part, this is due to Blaze being surrounded by few people, now living what was Sonic's life before he met most of his friends. As for Sonic, well, we'll see what's going on with him in the Soul dimension in a little bit. Unfortunately, Rush is pretty far into the timeline, so we have a lot of ground to cover before we can see Sonic. Outside of this swap, nothing else about the world will change. Everything else is exactly the same, and I mean exactly the same. The only changes will be caused by the character's actions, or possibly their inaction. Quick shout out to Brutus on Twitter for doing all of the custom art for this video. She's a great artist. If you like these designs, seriously consider checking her out. Before we can get to all that, let's go over Blaze's new backstory. Blaze lives her early life on South Island, a remote island that honestly doesn't have a lot going on. It's a peaceful place, at least for most people. Blaze's pyrokinesis, however, puts her at odds with the other residents. She's powerful, far too powerful for a mere child. Blaze's flames scare most of those around her, causing her to be isolated from her peers from a young age. This outcome is hinted at by a line of dialogue from Sonic Rush already, and it's easy to see why people would be frightened by a small child that could accidentally destroy their entire home. This experience makes Blaze rather lonely, though it doesn't completely harden her heart. Blaze yearns for the acceptance of her community, and despite most people telling her to never use her powers, she trains them in secret, hoping to one day have such fine control over her powers that no one would ever need to fear her again. Over time, Blaze gains an amazing control of her pyrokinesis, and soon begins to see her powers as a blessing rather than a curse. While they were inconvenient for her at one point, she's able to accomplish amazing things with them. She's unable to convince anyone around South Island of their practicality, but eventually Blaze is content with her lot in life. At least, she believes she is. All of this leads into Sonic 1, when Eggman attacks and begins kidnapping the woodland creatures of South Island in his search for the Chaos Emeralds. Seeing all of this happening, Blaze leapt into action and fought against the Mad Doctor, just as Sonic did. Both characters are proactive and powerful enough that I could see both of them reacting to the situation in pretty much the same way. From here, the events of the game go about the same. Blaze is able to track down the, at the time, 6 Chaos Emeralds and uses her powers to defeat Dr. Eggman. It's only after the events of the game that things start to diverge ever so slightly. After saving South Island, Blaze returns to her home and is surprised to receive a great amount of fanfare. Suddenly, the people who had been so afraid of her not too long ago are celebrating her powers and her bravery. While flattered, Blaze can't help but feel a bit strange about this whole situation. A part of her feels that all this recognition is insincere in some way, conditional on her having helped the residents of South Island previously. Disturbed by this development and her own confused feelings about it, Blaze decides to take some time to herself. She leaves South Island for a vacation to try and sort her feelings out. On this extended vacation, Blaze comes across something very curious. She sees a small planet above a lake, held down with a massive chain. Even worse, Blaze spots the all too familiar creations of Dr. Eggman around the area. Sensing that something is wrong, Blaze decides to investigate. While on Tiny Planet, Blaze runs into who else but Amy Rose. Amy explains that she was brought here by her tarot cards and that somewhere on Tiny Planet is her Prince Charming. Blaze is a bit confused by this, especially by the idea that a bunch of cards can somehow divine the future, but she decides to just go along with it for Amy's sake. Of course, they don't get to socialize for too long. After just a few minutes of conversation, a loud noise catches the pair's attention. A metal copy of Blaze swoops in and grabs Amy, kidnapping her right out from under Blaze's nose. Blaze tries to give chase, but her metal counterpart fires a flamethrower in her direction. Its fire is hotter than anything Blaze has ever dealt with, and she has to flee to avoid danger. This is the latest and greatest creation of Dr. Eggman, Metal Blaze. Now, Metal Sonic was made to be a better version of Sonic, and to that end was equipped with a jet engine to allow him to emulate Sonic's speed. Seeing as Blaze's most notable trait is her use of fire, Metal Blaze would instead be equipped with a flamethrower able to produce and withstand fire of intense temperature. The message from Eggman is the same either way. Anything you can do, my machines can do far, far better. Ashamed of her own weakness, Blaze decides that she has to save Amy no matter what. She continues to travel through time and across Tiny Planet in search of the Time Stones. On her journey, she's repeatedly faced with images of her robotic copy causing havoc, burning down forests and setting fire to the homes of others. It's like looking into a dark mirror, a version of herself that's every bit as dangerous as everyone said she was. A monster without remorse for her actions, only capable of destruction. Blaze hates what she sees and swears to destroy the mockery of herself that Dr. Eggman has created. After a long and grueling journey, though a journey that Blaze finds herself enjoying herself on more than she would have initially thought, Blaze finds herself face to face with Metal Blaze once again. They're trapped in a furnace, the destroyed scraps of Badniks being melted down and recycled on various conveyor belts in the area. Amy dangles from a cage above them, slowly being lowered into a pit of fire. Smoke billows in the air around them, and slowly, the temperature of the room is increasing. Metal Blaze stares at her, completely unmoving, the hot orange flames around them flickering and reflecting off of her surface. Metal Blaze fires up her flamethrower, and the battle begins. It's a long and difficult fight. Metal Blaze is focused entirely on her organic copy's destruction, pursuing her with single-minded vitriol. Blaze, on the other hand, has only one thing on her mind: protecting Amy. The cage is getting closer and closer to a furnace with every passing second, and Blaze could never live with herself if she failed to save somebody in danger. After landing a solid blow on Metal Blaze that sends her skittering across the arena, Blaze launches herself up to the cage and uses her flames to melt the bars, grabbing Amy and jumping to safe ground below. She soon realizes that taking her eyes off of the robot was a bad idea, though. A pillar of flame is launched at the pair faster than Blaze can dodge. Instead, she spins around, protecting Amy with her own body. The smell of burnt fur fills the area, and Amy stares up at Blaze with a look of terror. Metal Blaze is unrelenting, keeping her fire coming while approaching with slow, even steps. As she watches Blaze struggle to keep her safe, Amy's terror turns to anger. With a burst of speed that no one expected of her, including herself, Amy launches herself over Blaze and towards Metal, hammer in hand. With one powerful blow, Amy launches Metal into the wall, scoring a massive blow against their enemy. Amy hurries to Blaze's side to make sure she's okay. Blaze waves her off with a smile. She's been burnt plenty of times before. It comes with the territory, after all. As Blaze looks at her metallic clone, her expression darkens. She approaches Metal Blaze, collapsed onto the ground in a sputtering heap of wires and steel. Blaze summons her flames, ready to destroy Metal Blaze once and for all when Amy jumps in front of her. Amy begs Blaze not to do this, and Blaze is taken aback. She asks why Amy would vouch for someone who would hurt her, and Amy says simply that she can't stand to see Blaze hurt people, that this isn't who she is. Her words get to Blaze, and Blaze decides to spare Metal for Amy's sake. From there, Blaze confronts Dr. Eggman. She's able to defeat him in short order, and she escapes Tiny Planet alongside Amy. Once they're safe again, Blaze apologizes to Amy for not being able to keep her safe, and Amy tells Blaze not to worry about it. Blaze makes a small comment about Amy's card readings being wrong, saying that they weren't able to find her Prince Charming after all, and Amy laughs to herself before saying that she's pretty sure she did find her prince. With that, she hugs Blaze, to which Blaze gets extremely flustered at the attention, and that's pretty much their dynamic until at least Sonic Adventure 2. I know Sega wouldn't have actually gone in this direction because they hate fun, and I did consider Blaze and Amy just being friends, with Blaze trying to be Amy's wingman or something to that effect, but I thought this was cute. Personally, I think the dynamic of Amy crushing on Blaze and Blaze being flustered by it is more fun than Amy crushing on Sonic and Sonic just not reacting to it or being annoyed by it or whatever. Regardless, that's where we leave things as of Sonic CD. After her adventure on Tiny Planet, Blaze finds herself worrying about the whereabouts of Dr. Eggman. He had proven himself to be quite the problem already, and Blaze felt that she should do something about him. Not to mention that outside of the more dangerous moments where people's lives were hanging in the balance, Blaze had found that she enjoyed going on her little adventures. Being able to use her abilities to their fullest extent after having to hide them her entire life was a freeing experience. With these thoughts in mind, Blaze decided to continue her little vacation into the foreseeable future, roaming around with her biplane, the Inferno, which she has for some reason. To be fair, it makes about as much sense as Sonic randomly having a biplane. While on her journey scouting around for Eggman, she runs into some issues. A storm kicked up out of seemingly nowhere while she was flying, and due to her inexperience with being a pilot, Blaze ended up crashing the Inferno. She survives without injury, but the Inferno is completely trashed. Blaze knows how to do routine maintenance on the plane, but actually repairing it from this kind of damage is beyond her. It seems that Blaze may have to leave her precious plane behind, a thought that upsets her to no end. Rather than dwell on that, Blaze decides to look for some help on the island she crashed into, specifically West Side Island. While walking around, Blaze stumbles upon something very worrying. A group of foxes are bullying a two-tailed fox for his mutation. Blaze, having experience with being singled out by others, refuses to let this stand. She scares off the bullies with her fire and then approaches the young fox, introducing herself and asking if he's alright. The young boy stares up at Blaze with wide eyes, totally enamored by her powers, but he's too shy to actually say anything. Blaze is a little confused, but thinks little of it. She continues on her merry way with Tails following behind her. Blaze attempts to get some extra parts for her plane from the locals, but comes up with very little of use. Eventually, she returns to the Inferno and does her best to fix it with what she's found, but fails to make any meaningful progress. Frustrated and disappointed, Blaze decides to retire for the night. Of course, this entire time, the young fox has been following her around. When Blaze wakes up the next morning, she finds that the Inferno has been completely repaired, and standing next to it, murmuring to himself, is the young fox, seemingly working on the machine. Blaze asks the fox if he did this, and the fox twists around. He begins apologizing, saying that he intended to be long gone by the time Blaze woke up. Blaze calms the young boy down and says it's amazing that he was able to do this at his age. The fox finally introduces himself as Miles Prower, but murmurs that everyone just calls him Tails. Blaze is able to put two and two together, and she asks if he wants to be called that, to which Miles says no. Blaze in a lot of ways is a lot less forward than Sonic is, though no less empathetic. They deal with these kinds of situations in different ways. While Sonic would use the nickname Tails affectionately to help Tails sort of reclaim it for himself, I think Blaze would take the more direct approach here and just ask Miles what he wants to be called. So in this version of events, Tails is going to be going as Miles. Anyway, Blaze says that she thinks Miles is quite impressive and asks if he wants to accompany her while she searches for Dr. Eggman, to which Miles quickly agrees. From there, the pair travel around West Side Island together, finding sparse evidence of Eggman's involvement, but still enough that Blaze knows he's up to something. While on their journey, Blaze learns more about Miles and encourages him to continue his interest in engineering. She also notes that his tails seem quite powerful. Miles says that he doesn't want to use them, considering how everyone judged him for it, and Blaze confides in him that people judged her for her fire as well. This is enough to get Miles to experiment more with the tails, and eventually discovers that he can use them for flight as well as to propel himself along the ground more quickly. As they travel, Blaze discovers that Eggman has built a giant machine called the Death Egg, capable of destroying not only West Side and South Side Island, but possibly entire continents or more, all powered by the Chaos Emeralds. Upon learning of this, Blaze decides she needs to find the emeralds before Eggman and destroy his latest scheme. As she sets off on her new quest, Miles attempts to follow, but Blaze stops him. Blaze says that it's far too dangerous for someone Miles' age, and while Miles tries to argue against her, Blaze is firm in her stance. Dejected, Miles stays put while Blaze runs off to fight Eggman, though he secretly follows Blaze from a distance to make sure that she's safe. From there, Blaze continues fighting through Eggman's forces and finding the location of the Chaos Emeralds on her own, finding little resistance until the very end. Once she actually climbs aboard the Death Egg, things get a lot more difficult. The struggle to get through Eggman's most powerful fortress yet leaves Blaze tired and worn down, far more so than Sonic would have been in this position, because Blaze was on this journey alone with no backup or help. This leaves her in a much worse position when she finally makes her way to the center of the Death Egg, and there, Dr. Eggman in his Death Egg robot. Miles is following behind her, far enough away that Blaze can't notice him. However, Eggman with all his cameras and sensors is more than aware of the Fox's presence. As their battle continues, Blaze is worn down, but still winning the fight. Eggman has a trick up his sleeve, however, so it's not gonna last forever. At the climax of their battle, Eggman reveals that Miles has followed Blaze onto the Death Egg, bringing up several monitors showing the young Fox and activating traps around him. Miles is able to narrowly avoid harm with his fight, but Blaze allows herself to be distracted by this trick. Eggman attacks her, landing a finishing blow that puts Blaze out of commission, though still conscious. Eggman gloats over Blaze, preparing to finish her off once and for all when Miles appears to save her. Miles puts up a good fight, but is unable to finish off the Death Egg robot. Eggman scores an attack on Miles and grabs him, threatening to end the Fox and force Blaze to watch. Seeing Miles hurt and seeing the true depths of Eggman's cruelty awakened a fury inside of Blaze that she didn't know she could feel. All of her self-doubt and worry was pushed away by a single-minded desire to protect the young Fox and her righteous anger at the Doctor for endangering him. The fact that Blaze was already at her limit, that she didn't have any fight left in her, ceased to matter, and Blaze pushed her body and mind past their limits. In doing so, she awakened a power that she wasn't even aware of. A light bursts throughout the room, taking both Eggman and Miles back. They stare at where Blaze was, and instead see something that they never expected. Blaze, in her righteous fury, had tapped into the power of the Chaos Emeralds for the first time, ascending to Super Blaze. Before Eggman can even begin to plead for mercy, Blaze barrels through the Death Egg robot and grabs Miles, destroying the core of the Death Egg in one fell swoop. She makes quick work of anything in their path as she carries Miles back to the surface. The Death Egg crashes down, landing on a peculiar island, but Blaze doesn't care about any of that right now. All she cares about is making sure that Miles is safe. Once they touch down on Westside Island and Blaze confirms that Miles is unharmed, she reverts back to her normal form. Then she scolds Miles for following her against her wishes. It was clearly too dangerous for him to go out there and fight against Eggman. Miles, timid as he is, can't help but argue back. He saw how hard it was for Blaze out there, and if he hadn't been there, something awful could have happened to her. She almost lost against Eggman, and it was only Miles' timely intervention that had saved her. Blaze wants to argue against him, but finds herself unable to say anything. She realizes that what she's doing is really dangerous, and they can't fight Eggman without risk. Besides, it's not like she's that much older than Miles is anyway. With all of those thoughts in mind, she says that Miles can come along with her on her future adventures, as long as he promises to be careful and ask for her help if he needs it. Miles immediately agrees, and Blaze starts to think about what they need to do next. The Death Egg wasn't completely destroyed, and there is a possibility that Eggman survived and is still a threat, Blaze reasons. She decides that they should go to where the Death Egg had crashed to investigate. The pair decide to take a day to rest and recover from their fight, and then set off towards the Death Egg in the morning. This leads into Sonic 3 and Knuckles, and to be perfectly honest, from this point on, the rest of the classic era will go about the same as it does in canon. Eggman still tricks Knuckles on Angel Island and inevitably betrays him to steal the Master Emerald. Afterward, Blaze, Knuckles, and Miles all team up to take on Eggman one final time before finally destroying the Death Egg for good. Once the incident is resolved, they're all largely on good terms, though Blaze and Knuckles do have a bit of a rivalry. The events of games like Sonic Mania and Superstars go largely the same way. Blaze still meets characters like Mighty and Ray, Team Hooligan, and eventually Trip, and makes friends with all of them sans Team Hooligan. Actually, I imagine that Blaze would be a lot more annoyed with Team Hooligan than Sonic is most of the time. There are still some notable changes though. For one, Blaze takes a far more active role in helping Miles grow into his passion for engineering than Sonic does, going out of her way to track down study materials and opportunities for him to learn more about the craft. This means that her dynamic with Miles is actually pretty different to Sonic's dynamic with Tails. Where Sonic is a cool older sibling that Tails always looks up to, Blaze is a bit of a doting, overprotective older sister that ends up starting to annoy Miles a bit. Though he does think that she's really cool whenever she's not nagging at him. I also imagine that Amy stops being quite so overbearing with Blaze faster than she does with Sonic. Amy has gotten a lot less aggressive about her crush on Sonic over time, and we know that Amy does mature over the course of their adventures together, but I think a big reason why Amy kept doing that for so long was that Sonic didn't really care. Some games did have Sonic get annoyed at Amy's advances, but he was never shown to be embarrassed or really all that upset by her doing it. Considering that Blaze is actively embarrassed by her advances, Amy, being so nice and caring, quickly decides to at least cool off a little bit for her sake, though she can't help but get a little too excited sometimes. Of course, most of this is just small differences in character dynamics, but there is a really interesting change that happens during the fight against Eggman on Angel Island. After the fight with Knuckles in Hidden Palace Zone that leads to Eggman stealing the Master Emerald, Blaze stops before she runs off to chase Eggman. For whatever reason, her attention is stolen by the mural behind them. There, she sees a fight between what seems to be one of Eggman's robots and a blue hedgehog, surrounded in yellow light. She can't help but draw connections between the hedgehog's condition and her own super form. Was this a prophecy? What did it mean, and who was this mysterious blue hedgehog? As she stared up at the mural, Blaze couldn't help but feel that something had gone very wrong. Of course, she didn't have too long to dwell on that. She had to get back to work and chase down Eggman, but that mural left an impression on Blaze. It brought up a lot of unanswered questions, and those are questions that would remain unanswered for quite some time. Alright, that's all for now. If you like this video, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss the other parts of the series, and if you really loved it, consider becoming a member to help support the channel. I'm trying to make it a habit of reading off all the names of the members at the end of each video, so big shout out to Elric111 for supporting the channel.